So I'm Jay Dawes, and I'm here with Elite Sports Services, and have the pleasure of being here with Coach Alan Hedrick today. Coach, really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and chat a little bit about some of the things that you're doing down here at CSU Pueblo.
That you asked me.
Thanks. And, hey, so just to give the audience a little bit more information about you, I mean, you've got just a wealth of experience, and you've been at so many different big programs, and have done this for so many years. Can you kind of give us a quick background, a snapshot of where you've been, what you've done, and kind of what got you to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from California originally, born and raised. I got my undergraduate degree at Chico State in exercise science. It's kind of interesting. When I graduated, I went to one of my professors and asked him where he recommended I go to get my master's degree, and he recommended BYU. And so I applied, was accepted, and we were literally just a couple weeks away from moving to Provo, and a job at Fresno State came open. My wife has relatives in the area. Like I said, we're from California, so it made it much closer for us. And so we went down and I interviewed for the job there and was hired at Fresno State. So I ended up getting my master's degree at Fresno State after being about 2 weeks away from moving to Utah. After having graduated from Fresno State with my master's degree, my first job coming out of college was at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs as a research assistant, which was a 1-year appointment at the time. So at the time, my wife and I had 2 kids. We made the move out to Colorado, even though it was a 1-year appointment, knowing that having the opportunity to put the Olympic Training Center on my resume would be a huge advantage for me. So we took the risk, thinking that we were going to be moving out to Colorado for a year. But during that time period, the job transitioned from a research assistant to a full-time position, and I was fortunate enough to be offered that job and took the job, and ended up spending 3 years at the training center, which, like I said, was a great experience. Awesome opportunity to work with some very elite athletes. One thing I missed, though, working at the training center is that I never had the chance to ever really watch my athletes compete. The vast majority of their competitions are either nationally or internationally. Very few competitions are ever held at the training center. And for me, as a strength coach, that's one of the rewards of my job, is being able to actually watch my athletes compete. I do a lot of publishing, and at the time there was a pretty extensive sports science library at the training center, and the person who was the assistant strength coach at the Air Force Academy at the time, Kim Goss, also did a lot of publishing, and we met each other at the sports science library at the training center. After a period of time, Kim decided that he wanted to leave the academy, and so he recommended me for the job, and the Air Force Academy called me up, and I went up and interviewed for the job there, and was fortunate enough to spend almost 12 years at the Air Force Academy, the first 3 as the assistant, and then the last 9 years there as the head strength and conditioning coach. Again, an amazing opportunity, a great experience. So like I said, I spent 12 years there. After I left the academy, I went to work for the National Strength and Conditioning Association, which coincidentally is also in Colorado Springs. I've had kind of an unusual career as a strength coach in that I've changed jobs and really haven't had to move very far. Usually in this profession, when you change jobs, you end up moving states. And I've been in Colorado since the early 90s now. Spent about 3 years at the National Strength and Conditioning Association working there. And it was a great job. They were very fair to me financially, but I really missed the coaching aspect of profession. For me, that's what I enjoy doing. When they started the football program at CSU Pueblo, they didn't have a strength and conditioning coach position, and including through that first season. But the second year, they got that position approved. The head football coach, John Riston, called me up, asked me if I would be interested in taking the job down here. And took some convincing of my wife, because it was represented a decrease in salary, but she wanted me to be happy. She knew I'd be much happier coaching at the collegiate setting again, and I've been here for about 6 years now.
Very cool. And, and that's one thing, Coach, just from knowing you over the years, this is where you're at home, and it's so good to see you in this environment. It's fun to come in the weight room when you're coaching. So I'm really excited to see you down here and having so much success with your programs. I mean, last year with football, and whatnot. I mean, so last couple years, tell them a little bit about the football team and their standings and whatnot.
So they brought the football program back after about a 20-year hiatus. They dropped the program in the 80s for financial reasons. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, they decided to bring the program back as a way to help promote the school, help promote enrollment. So the program has been in existence, I believe, 7 years now. From a success standpoint, it's been a pretty amazing story in that we've now won 4 conference championships in a row.
Wow.
Went undefeated in conference play for 40-some games. Last year, we had the opportunity to play and win the national championship. So for that to happen in such a short period of time has been a very rewarding experience, obviously. So many coaches, sports coaches, strength conditioning coaches go through their whole career without ever winning a national championship. To have that opportunity, to have that experience was extraordinary.
Yeah. No, and like I said, it's great to get to watch it on the news and follow it from afar, as well as get to know you and kind of see all the success that you've had here, as far as some of the different training programs that you've implemented, and some of the things that you've done to help not only improve their performance but make them more injury resistant as well. And I think from just over the years that I've known you, some of the things that you've had a profound influence on my career and how I've coached and trained. And I think some of the things that really stand out are your use of dumbbells for the Olympic weightlifting movements. Because I remember seeing a lot of younger strength coaches now, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you could use dumbbells for this stuff, and it just blows their mind. They love it. But that, and then kind of the use of odd implements and different things that you did out at Air Force Academy with the water-filled training devices and things of that nature. So if you don't mind, like, can you share a little bit, like, how did you come up with that stuff? Because that's just really cutting edge techniques. So.
When I was working as a graduate assistant at Fresno State, the strength coach there at the time, Roberto Parker, mentioned to me that a few years previously, the New York Giants, who were playing in the Super Bowl, came out and trained at Fresno State prior to going down to Southern California to play the game. And while they were in the weight room at Fresno State, the strength coach for the Giants at the time, Johnny Parker, had his athletes performing dumbbell cleans, which I had never heard of before. So from a coaching standpoint, from a biomechanical standpoint, from a sports specificity standpoint, being able to do some of the Olympic lifts with dumbbells made perfect sense to me. It was actually pretty rewarding. Like I said, I do a lot of publishing. And so I happened to publish an article in the Strength Conditioning Journal on some of the things that we were doing with dumbbells. And Coach Parker, who at that point Coach Johnny Parker from the Giants, had moved on. He was actually the strength coach for the 49ers at the time. He called me up and asked me if he could come out and watch what our athletes were doing in terms of the Olympic lift with dumbbells.
Yeah,
so
Johnny Parker, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, that's serious, yeah.
Yeah, so to go from first hearing about it, from him performing dumbbell cleans with his athletes, to him coming out and wanting to watch what we were doing was extraordinarily rewarding and humbling.
Yeah, I think that's what's so great about our profession is, like, there's so many opportunities where, a coach kind of sparks that idea, and then you kind of add your own spin to it, and it just keeps, progressing and developing, and, just all the things that you can do with it. And, fortunately you're doing a video for us on, dumbbell training and, using the Olympic lifts for sports performance, and, just really excited to see that. You're also going to be looking at doing one for us on the active resistance training, which to me is pretty interesting as well. I work a lot with law enforcement groups, and trying to deal with that unstable resistance and trying to control somebody who may be resisting arrest or something of that nature is a situation that they have to come into quite often. So we utilize it with those populations quite a bit. So I guess just kind of to the point, where did you come up with this idea, and how have you used it in the past as well?
You might be disappointed with this answer, but I'll be honest and say I can't remember where I was first introduced to the idea of using water as a resistance. But it made perfect sense to me as a supplement to our more traditional type of training. So if you think about the type of resistance that a football athlete, a wrestling athlete, a hockey athlete encounters during competition, it's not a static resistance. that a typical barbell or a dumbbell provides. It's an active resistance that really only water can provide, because the water's moving back and forth the whole time. And so the athletes are having to train and control that active resistance, exactly what happens on the football field when they're attempting to block or tackle somebody. So, it's certainly downsides of using only active resistance, because the intensity of training is going to be less. You can't bench as much with a water-filled keg as you could with a barbell, because the active resistance makes it much more challenging. But in terms of supplementing more traditional type of training with that active or dynamic resistance, to me it makes perfect sense. They're going to encounter an active resistance during competition. They're going to encounter an active resistance in the weight room.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that the way we've tried to sell it with our athletes and with our officers is a lot of them are interested in balance training and things of that nature, just because they've seen it somewhere on the internet or in some magazine, and trying to explain to them most of the time the ground is quite stable, and it's what you have to do up here that you have to really work on controlling.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're a surfer or a skier who are actually competing on an unstable surface, that's not where your balance is challenged from. It's from an outside force working on the body. So it's not the surface, it's the outside force that you're having to work against. And so by placing a water-filled log on your back, for example, to do squats, it more closely replicates what happens in a real-life situation.
Right. Well, I think, just as far as integrating it into a strength conditioning program, in the past I've used it quite a bit as far as build-up sets. So really trying to take the emphasis off the prime movers initially, and maybe trying to get those stabilizers to activate a little bit sooner. So when they go into their bigger lifts where we're having to ask for a lot of force production, they've kind of woke those muscles up, for lack of a better way of saying it. In addition to that, a lot of times if we're in a hypertrophy cycle, we may use that as some of our drop sets and things of that nature. Once they've done their heavier sets, is go a little bit lighter with the active resistance to allow them to continue to get that volume in, but still taking some of that overall stress off and allowing them to kind of accommodate to that. But what are some ways that you integrate it into the overall training scheme and program over the course of the year?
Right. So we split up first of all, let me say this, primarily our football athletes are using the dynamic resistance at this point, the active resistance. We split up our training so that our big skill position athletes train with barbells twice a week and dumbbells once a week. In contrast to that, our skill position athletes, our running backs, our defensive backs, etc., are on the dumbbell side twice a week, and on the barbell side once a week. So when either of those groups are on the dumbbell side, we supplement their dumbbell training with dynamic resistance. So for example, on their workout, if they're performing dumbbell bench, on their workout it says dumbbell/keg bench. So then they know how they have to perform at least one of those sets with that water-filled implement. We've recently added the logs as well. So now it says dumbbell/keg/log dumbbell press. So if they're performing 4 sets, at least one of those sets has to be with that water-filled implement as a supplement to their traditional type of training.
That's nice. So in that regard, you find that helps with maybe unloading a little bit and kind of switching up the dynamics of the exercise, because overtraining is a big issue, obviously, and if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you start running into those little repetitive type injuries and stressors and things of that nature. And I know, maybe adding the different forms of resistance in there kind of help ameliorate some of those potential issues as well.
Yeah, certainly, and probably not only physiologically but psychologically, in that they don't have to perform that same exercise over and over and over again. So they have the opportunity to perform it with a dumbbell, with a keg, with a log. So we're giving them that variety into their training program.
Yeah, and it's cool that you give them some options too, because I think that's one of the things that ultimately for buy-in is if they feel like they have a little bit of control over that, that probably helps as far as, again, with morale and attitudes and things like that.
Yeah, and the other thing, and I think that it bears mentioning, is that one thing I really try to emphasize as a strength and conditioning coach is not just tell my athletes what to do, but why to do it. So when we're using the water-filled implements, I'll take the time to explain what the benefit is. So it's not just like, I have to go perform this one set with the water, and I'm not really sure why. But if they have an understanding of what the benefit is, my feeling is they'll buy into what we're asking them to do more effectively. So I tell my athletes all the time, if you ask me 1,000 questions, I'm going to answer 1,000 questions for you.
Right.
The better you understand why we're trying to do what we do, the better you're going to buy into what it is that we're attempting to get done.
Right on. And then one other implement I want to talk to you about, because as far as tire flips and things like that, I remember, when I first saw, the tires that you guys utilize, you actually had the weights or the rack built in the center of it, where you could actually add and load those tires to a greater extent. You know, I think again, like some of the things you've done are just so incredibly innovative and just way cool. It makes me feel completely inadequate, but you know, with no comment on that. So, but looking at that, you know, as far as like with the tires and utilization of those in a training program, you know, how do you guys incorporate those types of, you know, non-traditional implements in, you know, in addition to like the active resistance and the
Right. So the same thing applies on our dumbbell days. When the athletes are performing any of their dumbbell Olympic lifts, on at least one of those sets, they're going to come over and flip the tire. You know the movement pattern, you're getting triple extension at the ankle, knee, and hip with the Olympic lift. Same exact thing occurs when you're flipping the tire. So it's a replication of the movement pattern that we're trying to develop. The other thing that I like about flipping the tire as compared to just performing a normal clean with a barbell or a dumbbell is that the movement pattern becomes horizontal in nature rather than just vertical.
Yeah, so just like driving off the line or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So we'll have our athletes flip the tire and then run through it. So they don't stand and watch the tire flip. They flip the tire, and as the tire's flipping over, they run through it. You know, again, for using football as an example, most of their movements are horizontal in nature, not vertical in nature. So we can more closely replicate what's happening out there on the football field.
All right, very cool. Well, Coach, hey, thank you for being here with us today. And again, you know, just there's so many things that you've done for the profession and shared. And like I said, for me personally, and I just really appreciate your time and really feel privileged to have this time with you. So.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. You know, I feel blessed that I get to do this for a profession. You know, I don't have to have a job. I get to do this instead. So it's a pretty awesome situation.
Yeah, right on. So, thanks again, Coach. Appreciate it.
Yep.